What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Best Albums, and today we had the privilege of being joined by Kwamé. Thank you for coming through, sir.
What's going on?
Yes. So
keep me talking, man. Like,
yeah,
I'm like the least talkative guy, and this guy's always asking me talking to him.
Hey, man.
Thank you.
That's because you got a lot of great insight on all these things.
Cool.
As I've grown to realize more and more, the more we talk, the better it gets.
All right.
So for Best Albums on this episode, Kwamé has selected Prince's Sign of the Times.
Yeah.
Now, this album came out in 1987.
Yes.
Prince was on an amazing streak at this time. You know, Purple Rain had been out.
Yep.
He'd been having all this huge success in film and in music.
Mm-hmm.
And also at the same time in 1987, rap was about to explode. We had gone from the 12-inch era into getting into more people doing albums and different things.
Yep.
And then Sign of the Times comes out. So before the album came out, I know you have a deep love and appreciation for Prince, but before this album came out, how did you view him?
Yeah. Well, I always viewed Prince, you know, I don't want to use the cliche, the musical genius of Prince, you know, not that. I just viewed Prince as the anti-star, if you put it that way. You know, everybody, you know, in the 80s, well, let me backtrack. The 80s itself, the era of the 80s with music and art was a very heavy time for self-expression.
Okay.
There were very few copycats out there, and the people who you choose to latch onto and follow were based on, I guess, your personal preferences and style. So say, for example, Prince and the movement around Prince, like Morris Day and The Time and Sheila E. and the other artists that he had.
The Revolution.
Yes, the Revolution and band. That kind of resonated with me because it felt like they were just about doing their own thing. Even though everybody was doing their own thing, they were doing their own thing.
And they were from Minneapolis, or at least most of them.
Yeah, and you know, they didn't come from like a popular city. You know, the city had its own sound. They had their own vibe, and I really appreciated it. You know, also, he was the one musical artist, like R&B, soul, pop, rock. You couldn't define that genre that he was in. And the subject matters that he was speaking about were a little bit more broad-based than what other people thought, but they were cryptic.
Okay.
So it was a type of thing where you would get into Prince because you would read, did you read what he wrote, blah, blah, blah. It was more of a liner note type thing and trying to decode some of the things that he was saying. So I was into him for that, but things shifted when Sign of the Times dropped.
And the title track, which also is the first track on the album, we get a lot of the social commentary everybody loves to say rap is so known for. He had a lot of that on the opening track.
Yes.
So when you first heard that in 1987, what was going through your mind?
Well, the two things that people don't really understand if you're not a Prince fan, the things that Prince always does, he always has a social commentary on the album, and he always had a gospel record on the album. And so Sign of the Times, you know, the subject matter wasn't new. You know, he was speaking, you know, at that time about that time, but it wasn't a new thing because people just say, okay, here comes the dude in the trench coat and thongs, and he's just going to be singing about sex or whatever. But you know, there was always that type of undertone of social awareness in his records. The thing that shifted in Sign of the Times seemed to be the first album devoid of the revolution.
Okay.
So now, musically, when you have his albums with the revolutions, there's a pop rock element to those records. If you listen to Sign of the Times, sonically, it sounds like he is in a room with his drum machine, his guitar, and his keyboard,
well,
making an album.
sonically, it is far more spare.
Yeah.
And stripped down.
Yes.
And you attributed that to the Revolution's absence.
Well, think about it. Well, just knowing this fact, pre-signing the Times, he didn't have Paisley Park Studios.
Right.
He didn't build his own studio yet. He was, working here in LA. He was working in, different spots, mainly LA studios, and, doing it big. The Revolution added their flavor to the records. It was a live band setting on top of the Lindrum sound that he pretty much perfected. But when you have Signing the Times going, it's him in his own studio now. A lot of people, if you read up on it, a lot of people felt that the sound was a little bit grimy. If you listen to the album, you hear hiss in the background. You hear, it wasn't that high of a quality, but it felt genuine. It felt like somebody in there making their music for the first time. The way he works that Lindrum, he makes it sound almost different on every other song. There's not very, very few live drum segments in there. The way he works his effects, and I know that when he was in the studio, he did a lot of things by himself. And then he had, I forgot the engineer, I forgot her name, but she would come in and clean it up. But like outside of the song, like It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night and maybe Playing the Sunshine, those songs are reminiscent of Revolution records, and they probably were Revolution records that he put on there. But other than that, it's just like I said, him in a room just doing his thing.
Yeah, and It's a Beautiful Night, of course, is the longest song on the album, over 9 minutes, and the album itself is extremely long.
It was a double album.
Yeah. So for you as a music connoisseur and as a huge fan of his, realizing this move away from the Revolution, but then it also being a double album, like what was your feeling of getting that double album from him at that point?
Her Father Leaves 1999 was a double album. I didn't look at it at that aspect of having a double album. I just looked at it as a learning experience. I studied that album as a musician. I studied it because it showed you can make great music by yourself. At that time, 14 going on 15, and I'm listening to the album, and my dad, I'm trying to figure out. That's the thing. Like, I'm trying to decode this album. I'm trying to musically decode this album. And in certain respects, on certain songs, I still try to do that to this day. There's certain songs on that album like, yo, man, I gotta figure out how he did that. Like, for example, Adore is one of the most musically complex records I've ever heard. And, a lot of people don't think about that. They just either like the song or they don't. But for me, I'm like, yo, man, the layers, he's only had 24 tracks. How did he do that?
Well, with The Door being the last song on the album, beyond it being the last song and beyond the music complexity of it, I think maybe because of the musical complexity of it, I always thought The Door sounded nothing like the rest of the album in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, I feel that too. And that's what I'm saying. Adore is like a super musical mystery to me. And on top of that, I don't think he likes the record.
Good.
You put a record last, you
right.
You kind of don't like the record, but everybody else is telling you to put the record on the album.
Okay.
And he very rarely performed it.
But to that point, which is also odd with Sign of the Times, the second half of it, I think has, to me, a lot of the more interesting, or at least very interesting songs. Like The Cross is on there, You Got the Look. A lot of those records that I probably prefer are on the second half of the album. So for you, like The Cross, was that be the one you consider the gospel?
Yeah,
or?
yeah,
Okay.
that's 100% a
So
record.
so for The Cross, that one is one of my favorites on the record. What did you like about The Cross?
That no matter what he talked about sexually or socially or just partying, he found time to acknowledge God.
Okay.
Whether you're a religious person or not, looking at Prince on the surface, you would think that's the last guy that would find time to acknowledge God on a record at all.
Right.
You know, and if you, there's always a record with that subject matter on his album, for the most part.
Right.
So that means that no matter what he was doing and how he was searching. He was searching for the higher meaning.
And then with that too, we have a lot of the exploration of him in relationships, as he did both sexually or actually romantically, that he explores on Silent Times.
Sure.
Like going on the superficial, you got the look per se, or I could never replace your man. Like,
Yeah.
Why do you think, or what did he do special as far as Prince does, looking at relationships, that you thought was different or distinctive on Silent Times?
The soft, what is it, Forever in My Life?
Mm-hmm.
That song, to me, touched on something like, yo, man, when you're a kid, you're very impressionable. And you look at older cats that you look up to, and you see how they get down and you see how they move, and you may end up maneuvering kind of the same way in certain respect. So in our minds, and you gotta understand, 80s is a whole nother time frame. So if a guy like Prince walks into a room today, you're like, okay, he's celebrating Pride today and he's having fun with himself, and that's what it is. But in the 80s, nobody thought that.
Right.
Like there was no thought behind it. You were like, hey,
that's a bad dude.
He's a pretty boy.
Like, what's up with
And
him?
he just gets all the chicks.
Right.
He wears high heels because he's short. I don't know. Like, you gave him every excuse. Same with Michael Jackson. Like, oh, he's just sensitive. Man, don't worry about it. You know, everybody had an excuse for their outwardness. And so saying that, you're thinking, you see Prince with Vanity, you see Prince with Apollonia, you see Prince with Sheila E. These are the ladies of the 80s, man. You're
Right,
like,
right.
oh,
The top tier.
yeah, man. He was messing with Madonna. You're like, yo, this guy's the man. So he makes a record like Forever in My Life, and he says, yo, man, I'm willing to settle down for you. He makes a record like The Door. I'm willing to just give it all up for you. So it's like you see that the multifaceted aspects of relationship, where he's not always talking about smashing a chick. He'll give you deep, meaningful love song.
Right.
And that's a part of the complexity of the album. You're not getting a character. You know what I'm saying? You're getting a fully faceted person in one album. And you learn a little bit more about the person, because pre-Silent Times, Prince was pretty much on his character. You know, it was like sex, party,
fun,
dance music, sex, romance. That's one of his songs, and that's what it was.
Right.
And where it kind of zeroes in, and it keeps going after Silent Times.
Right.
Love Sexy is a little bit, but I think Love Sexy before, after Silent Times. It's after. I'm sorry. But he starts to become self-aware through Sign of the Times on out. You know, the records. Put it this way: pre-Sign of the Times, Prince, when the Purple Rain was out, and this is nothing against mixed race children of the world at all, but Prince was reporting that, you know, he had a white mom, black father, the mixed race child, you know, he lived a dual life, and you know, that's the reason for his rock and his pop influences, when that was not the case.
Right.
You know, people believed that. They saw it on Purple Rain, they believed it, and they gave him a certain box. They put him in a certain box because of it, which should not be the case ever.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So once Sign of the Times came out, it seemed like he started to own who he was fully, what he was. Didn't necessarily make it about race or anything like that, but he started to put the funk and the soul that he's probably had all his life into these records, and still combine it with the rock and pop influence, and not use race as a reason to do so.
Okay.
If that makes any kind of sense. And you just saw that awareness happening with Sign of the Times.
And speaking of the other sonic thing that was interesting was the Starfish and Coffee with Nice and Smooth later being able to sample it.
I don't think they were able to sample
it. Well,
they sampled it.
According to Greg Nice, they were. He told me this.
Okay.
But that being said,
well, you know, I've been able to sample things, so things are possible.
However it works, it works.
Yes.
But musically and then lyrically and conceptually, what did you remember thinking about that song when you first heard it?
I was like, what the hell is he talking about?
I had the same thing.
You know, but that's one of his decoded things that I still haven't finished it. But what I'm thinking, he's talking, real quick before I finish it, ever seen him perform that on the Muppet Show?
No, I missed that.
He has performed Starfish and Coffee on the Muppet Show.
I missed that.
It is 1000% the most amazing thing to watch on YouTube ever.
Okay.
Because you would never think Prince would be on the Muppet Show, and that's the song that they do.
That's the song
and
of all
they reenact
songs.
The whole song in a lunchroom, and the little Muppets are acting like it's hilarious. But anyway.
Interesting.
I just think that either he was talking about a girl that brought drugs to school, or he was just in his bag about the different kid.
Okay.
Just a different kid. You know, he just, hey man, some records between Prince and Elton John, man, I don't know what the hell happened some of those songs are about, but hey.
Well, there it is. So Kwamé, now looking at it and the legacy of Sign of the Times and your feelings about it, what do you think makes it a best album?
Oh, well, for me, I can only speak for me. It's hands down probably in my top 2 albums, and because it takes me to a place in time where my musical curiosity was at an all-time high. My drive to be an artist was at an all-time high, and you know, I pair the album, just the time of that period was my ultimate age of discovery, man. It was when I started venturing out on my own without my parents with me or things like that, venturing out of Queens and hanging out in Brooklyn with friends, and everybody sitting around and listening to different albums, including this one. My very first major concert that I went to, you know, was that tour, and it was probably I've never seen a better show than that. You know, the stage. Well, it was based off of, because he dropped every year. So after Sign of the Time came out, he immediately dropped Love Sexy, and so the tour was dubbed the Love Sexy tour, but he was pretty much doing all the Sign of the Time records. And that album, that live tour album, I mean, the live tour video that came along with it, literally cemented in my mind, like, this is what I want to do, period. And so that's why that album holds a special place for me, because it just encapsulates everything that I was seeing and experiencing at the time.
Well, there it is, y'all. It's Best Albums, Kwamé. Sign of the Times. I'm Soren Baker, Unique Access, Best Albums.